Hey everybody, again, excited to start a new year. Just as Bill said, a couple reflection points. I think it was 56 days ago we won the national championship. Seems like yesterday. It's been very busy since then. We'll have appropriate time this fall to celebrate that team and its accomplishments. And as I've said before, it's a national championship team, which was our goal. But I also believe it will be regarded as one of the greatest teams in college baseball history. Not just the talent, but the consistency and approach, performance, and execution is something that you don't see hardly ever, and truly special team. Kind of where we went from there is we had the celebration on the Wednesday after we won. Thursday and Friday we had exit meetings with our players. Very proud to say we only had one player enter the transfer portal off of last year's team. So the collection of guys that could return decided that LSU was the best place for them to continue their career and will help us move ourselves forward as we get into 2024 as well. And then went right into a very busy month and a half relative to recruiting, finishing up this roster. Obviously, the transfer portal has changed the dynamic of how we do business. And then the MLB draft, which we were very successful with, only losing one of our incoming recruits to the draft, and which we think is a really talented, a smaller but talented class to add to those returners to get us off on a good note. And then the last couple days or week has been about reassembling a new coaching staff. Again, for the third year in a row, I think it's a sign of success that people want to get our people as part of their organization. Of the full-time assistants, the four that we've had here, three of them have become Power 5 head coaches within 1 year of being at LSU. I think that speaks to how people view LSU in terms of college baseball, and then the quality or the operation of our program right now, and I'm really excited. And as those guys get opportunities, the way I view it is it allows us opportunities to even further improve what we're doing here, and I believe we were able to do that, and bringing in Coach Yeskie and Coach Rooney. So we've needed time and are still in the midst of getting ourselves fully organized to press forward and put forth the effort that it takes to be the program that we want to be in 2024. And so that's been very fast. Some information for you as far as fall dates. We'll be in 8-hour weeks or skill instruction and strength and conditioning from today. We'll start in on that until October 4th, which is a Wednesday, and then we'll start our 45-day fall practice window on October 5th, the weekend of fall break. We'll run that to, I believe, November 20th will be the third game of the Purple and Gold World Series. So the key dates in there, November 5th, we'll play at McNeese, and then November 12th, we'll play Louisiana Lafayette here at home. And then the following weekend, that last weekend, will be the Purple and Gold World Series. So really excited about that. Relative to remarks on the roster, and happy to answer questions after you've talked to these guys and they've answered questions. Excited about what we have. I think each year you get a better feel for what's needed to compete at a national championship level or at the top of the Southeastern Conference, because those are all one and the same. I mean, our league is, running laps around the rest of college baseball in terms of where the best players, programs, and coaches are right now. So keeping pace, with that, it was a big effort. Obviously, great team, one of the best teams in college baseball history last year. You're only going to get to that point with not just talent with skill that has an enormous amount of experience, and that encapsulated our team last year. And at the same time, we're excited about what those experience will do to propel us forward. I think we had more freshmen at bats than just about any team in the SEC. Obviously, in the College World Series, you had freshmen pitching significant innings, Griffin Herring and Gavin Guidry. So we feel good about that part of it. I really like, what we've assembled. I think there's a blend of, there's a few guys that were key parts of that run on the position player side of it. Then there's a grouping that were also key parts of that team at a point during the season where it's their time now to take a step forward. And as I mentioned earlier, players make their biggest jump usually in our program between year one or year two of us arriving or them arriving on campus. And we have several candidates for that, and I'm excited to dig into that next phase with the Brady Neals, Paxton Klings, Jared Jones of the world on the position side of it. And then we tried to supplement what we needed to do, obviously, with the high school class and the portal. We did not go crazy in terms of numbers of players that we signed in the high school class. I think we hit on 3 areas of need, bringing in, 3 really good high school left-handed pitchers in terms of Cameron Johnson, Jake Brown, and Cade Anderson. Speaking about those guys a little bit, it was a big surprise, in terms of talent and actually showing up on a college campus with Cam Johnson. Right prior to the draft, it's 100 miles an hour at the combine and in the strike zone, with the breaking ball. When you see him, we're going to keep him away from Coach Kelly because he looks like he could play defensive end for the Tigers. So he won't be walking over to Tiger Stadium anytime soon, or to the football building. Jake Brown was the Gatorade Player of the Year in Louisiana. We will attempt to have him be a two-way player, predominantly viewed as a prospect, as a pitcher, but you're talking about a terrific athlete who was one of the best hitters, if not the best hitter in the state last year. We need to, elevate the athleticism and the left-handedness of what we're doing, on the position player side of it. I think Jake can help us do that. And then Cade Anderson had Tommy John at the end of his junior year of high school, and it's my opinion, had that not happened, you never want to see a player get hurt, but he might not be here right now in terms of where he was headed as a prospect. So feel great about those additions as freshman pitchers. In the infield, obviously, with Jordan and Gavin moving on to professional baseball, we've got 3 high school shortstops that we really like that we signed. Stephen Milam from New Mexico, switch hitter, can play short, can play second. Feel really, really good about him and his potential ability to play early. He is a baseball player through and through. Very heady player, and I think will adjust well to this level. And the competitiveness is off the charts, and that's what you need, to be successful early in your career here, because it's a steep challenge. Ryan Kacharik from Hamilton High School in Arizona, which is one of the best programs. It's in the handful of best high school programs in the country. Terrific athlete, 6'5", 60-yard dash runner, really good infield skills, some lightning in the bat, as all of these guys will need to do, just get stronger. And then Austin Rolig had a terrific summer in Utah. When I brought him here, he was one of the first players we committed. It's because we really believe he can play shortstop. And because he's a tick undersized, we believed that we would not lose him in the draft. And he's continued to play well, through his high school career and into the summer. And then a couple left-handed hitting outfielders with Derek Mitchell and then Ashton Larson, who was drafted in the 20th round. So want to keep that dynamic going. It was very valuable for us the last 2 years. And then the other transfer pitcher that we had signed was Fidel Iloa from Delta College, a really good arm that we evaluated last fall, and excited to see what he can do with Coach Yeskie. Then assessing, the one thing I do like about the transfer portal is you have the ability to assess where you're at as a team, in the immediate of last year and where the needs might be, and to be able to fill gaps to compete at the level that we want to, which is an Omaha National Championship caliber level. Our pitching staff really stepped up last year, and most of it was entirely new, outside of Ty Floyd. And so we wanted to, and Paul Skeens, obviously. We wanted to recreate that Paul Skeens, Stature Hurd model as best we could in the transfer portal this year. Getting Luke Holman from Alabama was a massive recruit for us. I think he was one of the 4 or 5 best pitchers in the SEC last year. as we prepared to face Alabama, and even though Luke didn't end up pitching, I remember walking down the hallway to Jamie Tutko, and I'm like, this guy's pretty good. Like, I mean, Chase Dollander, who was the 7th pick in the draft last year from Tennessee, I was like, that's kind of what this looks like to me right here. So really, really excited to add Luke. Gage Jump from UCLA was a very highly sought after prospect in high school, decided to come to college, turn down money. Once he went in the transfer portal, we had pursued him aggressively. He chose UCLA over Arizona, so there was a lot of history, with Gage in the initial recruiting part of it, which probably helped us have a little bit of an advantage, in that regard. Cade Woods, reliever from Alabama, Louisiana player, was very excited that we had interest once he went in the transfer portal. And then Justin Lohr from Xavier, lefty, tough angle, really good physical pitcher, competitor. Had a great season from a stats standpoint last year. Closed out the game against Vanderbilt in the NCAA tournament against them. I think all 4 of those guys will blend well with the returning pitchers that we have to form a really, really good pitching staff. I think that if you ask me on paper, I believe that will be the strength of our team in 2024. And then on the position player side of it, again, kind of looking down the microscope of what does it take to compete at the top of the Southeastern Conference. I really, really appreciate Jordan Thompson and what he did for us the last 2 years. I mean, him and Dylan Cruz were the only 2 players that started every game of 2022 and 2023. Having a veteran presence in the middle of the infield was going to be super important. Adding Michael Braswell from South Carolina, really like his skill set in terms of what he does. Played very well against us, and I think there's another tick in his game that we can get on the development horse, so to speak, and go get and help Michael be a really, really good player and pro prospect out of LSU. And then adding Mac Bingham out of the University of Arizona, really, really good addition. Had 92 hits last year, like around 360 with doubles power, home runs power. Completely thought he would get drafted. Massive surprise that he didn't. And then obviously having the history that we did of coaching him for 2 years, recruiting him. Once he was not going to go to professional baseball and kind of settled that he wasn't getting drafted or not going to sign a free agent deal. Obviously the previous relationship thing helped out there. I think he will add a presence that we will be missing from those guys last year when you talk about a Cade Beloso, Gavin Dugas, Braden Jobert, those guys that had those 2 years of playing for us and had that high leverage experience. That will be the thing that we need to work with this roster the most on is getting them towards those competitive and professional at bats that help our team win. And then obviously there's a few more players on there. Certainly don't want to leave anybody out in this that we feel like will give us some quality depth, and really looking forward to developing the pieces right now. Nobody is a starter at this point in time. There's no bullpens. There's not a position on the field that we go like, hey, that's done, that's locked up, that's where that player is going to be. So excited about this roster, excited to get to work with them and reinvest in 2 things. And number one is I think it'll be important, and we'll talk way more about this as we get closer to the spring, but you want to emulate some of those positive qualities that have been built as a foundation over the last couple years here in terms of how we roll, so to speak. And then there's an element of moving on and kind of forgetting 2023. We'll celebrate that at the appropriate times, and then it'll all be about this team. It's their time now to step to the forefront, and really excited to get to work with that. So I'll be back in a little bit.
Right, and again, as Coach Jay said, he'll be back after we meet Coach Yeskie and Coach Rooney, and Jay will answer all your questions regarding the upcoming season. So It's a pleasure to welcome to LSU Coach Nate Yeskie, who is LSU's new pitching coach, and it's great to have him on our side now. We faced Nate Yeskie many times over the years when he was the pitching coach at Oregon State. And, of course, he helped lead Oregon State to the 2018 National Championship. Most recently, he served as the pitching coach at Texas A&M prior to coming here to LSU. So he's very familiar with facing the Tigers. Now he'll be one of the Tigers. We talked last week, and his very first experience in the old Alex Box Stadium was as a player. He pitched for UNLV at the 1996 Regional at the old box. Coach Bertman will remember that was the closest game that LSU played in the postseason until the national championship game. It was a one-run win over UNLV. Great defensive play at the end of the game that helped the Tigers win. So Nate maybe will share some memories about facing LSU back in the day. So pleasure to introduce now our new pitching coach, Nate Yeskie.
Hi there. Appreciate you guys coming out today and getting a chance to go through this process a little bit with, I guess, a new face. Hopefully we can continue to build upon the tradition and continue to develop the guys and help them win ball games for the Tigers. You know, in speaking with Coach Bertman, it's funny that a lot of those things tend to get lost in, the landscape of college baseball, where our job is to help get guys better, no doubt. But when you look at what that really is, I think kids, when they come here, they have envisions of playing in Omaha. They have envisions of playing in major league stadiums one day. But to get to those points, you have to win for the Tigers. And you have to do the things that you need to do on a daily basis that's going to help you become a better player and ultimately help you become a better teammate that ends up being really something that, whether you're a reliever, whether you're a starter, whether you're a guy that comes in on the back end of the game, you help the Tigers win. And that's what my focus is going to be with this group of guys this year. That will continue through next year as well. And we will hopefully continue again to build upon the tradition that's been set here by so many guys in the past. And there's such a long list of names of contributors. And I think that's one thing that, if really stands out to me, looking from the outside in and now taking a chance to look at it from the inside out, is where do those guys fit in, how do they fit in, and ultimately we want them to contribute in any capacity, whether that's in a short stint facing one or two guys, or get us as deep as you can as a starter. So if anybody has any questions.
You guys wait for Ashley to give you a mic.
Hey, Nate, Cookie Riley with The Advertiser. I was sort of curious as to, this roster's got a lot of left-handed pitchers, and what's sort of your philosophy on the importance of having that really heavy balance of lefties and righties? Because I think you guys have more lefties this year than righties.
Well, no disrespect to right-handers, but you can never have enough left-handers. And my track record with being fortunate enough to be in the dugout with left-handers over the years, they've kind of paved the way with the success. I think there's some different things that are unique that they possess, being able to do some things relative to the running game with guys in front of them, certainly to offset some of the better left-handed bats who maybe didn't necessarily get to face those guys in high school, so now it's a different look for them. But with the young ones, I think there's a balance. You look at experience with Herring, as Coach Johnson had mentioned earlier, Ackenhausen, guys who have been through the battles and have some experience, and now you're starting to get in those younger guys with Anderson and Brown and Johnson. There's a lot of things to like with the pieces that are there. And a guy like Gage Jump, who's worked on the West Coast, the game's played a little bit different there. So each one of them is going to have some growing pains. Each one of them is going to have some things that I think they can impart upon the group and help those guys accelerate their game. And that'll be fun to kind of get those guys going. But I like the number that we're starting with, and hopefully we can continue to get all those guys in the mix.
Hey, Nate, Matt Moscona from ESPN Radio in Baton Rouge. If you would, maybe just why you chose to leave a really good program at A&M and join Coach Jay here at LSU.
Well, I think that you could hang your hat on many things. It starts with Jay. It starts with the history of the program. It starts with really what I believe that he's building here, or adding to, I should say, because this place has certainly built a tremendous foundation, and I think is really kind of the beacon of college baseball. And when you look at what Jay's been able to do in a short time, our time together in Arizona, while we didn't get to the top of the mountain in our second year together, I think we're still kind of in the midst of that because I really don't count that COVID year. So we've still got some time on the clock. But having some conversations with him and getting an understanding of how he lets me work and develop with our guys, we've got a good working relationship with a lot of things that we're familiar with. Jay reminded me of a story when we were out recruiting, ironically, at the University of Arizona many, many years ago. And he and I were standing outside the gate waiting for the event to get started where we could watch some guys. And that was kind of the first steps in our relationship moving forward. And we've battled on the recruiting trails. We've battled against each other in competition. And I think at one point he outlined it best when he gave me an opportunity to coach for him the first time, that he got sick and tired of trying to get some hits and some runs off of our pitchers. And I said, well, I'm sick and tired of trying to get your hitters out. So now at least we get to just do that in the fall and attack, whichever team we're playing on a particular day together.
Hey, Coach. Glenn West, Go 247. Just the last couple of years of being in the SEC and coaching in this conference, what have you learned about that you can kind of take into this job and how you can continue to grow the pitching staff here? Sure.
I think that when you look at it, there's certainly a larger population base east of the Mississippi, so there are more players to draw from. The style of play is a little bit different. I think a lot of times your players allow you to play it in a certain fashion. There's a physicality with certain players that you look at. The home run is certainly more prevalent. Strikeouts are also more prevalent. But at the end of the day, it's still baseball. And the team that tends to play it the best is the team that ends up on top when it's all said and done. So having been through it, it's interesting because you experience some things differently. I haven't been to some of the spots in this league, so when you walk in, you get a sense how does the park play, what do the elements have to do with it. Sometimes how does the fan base impact the game or how does it not. But I think I've scratched off just about every team in this league now as far as having played against them at some point, whether it be in the postseason or in the regular season the last couple of years. So there's a lot of things, and it's constantly evolving and moving based on how their rosters change and how ours does. So it's been a learning curve, but I think that we picked up on it pretty quick.
Hey, Coach. Matt Trent, Channel 2 here in Baton Rouge. Can you just describe or give us a outline of your pitching philosophies, how it relates to development of arms, just how you are as a pitching coach and how you get the best out of pitchers?
Yeah, I think you got to identify what they do well and look for some of those areas that you can start to make some progress in a quick fashion. Naturally, they want to be as a competitor, they want to be the best at everything that they can do, whether that's have the best fastball on the team, the best breaking ball, the best command. We need to narrow it down and focus on the areas that they can control, and then do that in an aggressive fashion. Try to get to whatever they do well, and whether that's get 3 outs for us in the 8th inning or whether that's get us as deep as they can in the game from the beginning, then we'll identify those things for each guy. But ultimately, I think it's helping them become the best version of themselves, both on and off the field. And then when they represent LSU, it's not just between the white lines, it's outside of that. So we take a pretty comprehensive approach into a lot of things that we feel like can benefit them and then ultimately help the university and the program as a whole.
Yeah, Ron Higgins, Shreveport-Bossier Journal. This is a third pitching coach in 3 years, and all these guys have different voices in their heads. So how does your voice get in their head and not get confused with the voices they've heard before? I guess kind of the best of everybody to kind of create a really good pitcher.
Sure. I think you start out, and we'll have some discussion here shortly with the pitching staff as a whole, but if you get into professional baseball, you're probably going to have a different guy at every level. So they're getting a head start on that. The other side of it is I'm familiar with JK and I'm familiar with Wes and how they've gone about things, having crossed paths with them. JK certainly more than Wes, but you try to make sure that the player takes some ownership. let them allow themselves to have some say in their development, what it really means to them. Let them put it in their terms, because I learned a long time ago as a coach that you walk into this thinking, I'm going to fix everybody, we're going to get everything dialed up, and we're going to storm the beach and really take advantage of everything right from the get-go. And the reality of it is that as a coach, if you're trying to force feed a lot of things down their throat, some kids don't digest it very well. They don't absorb a lot of the information. So as the years have gone by, I let them put it into their terms, try to get a better understanding things. Then we find a kind of a common ground or a vocabulary that we can all work within that really kind of sticks with a lot of them. And then you just continue to work it every day. I think it's a lot of times, much like my wife and her gardening. You plant the garden and it starts out nice and you water it and everything looks great, but there's some upkeep to it. You got to continue to pull the weeds and you got to continue to stay on top of things. So for our guys, it'll be the same thing where we're working at it every day. We'll have some back and forth, and ultimately, they have to take ownership of it because it is their career. We're trying to do the best that we can in their time here together.
Just a big part of this last year was just the implementation of the different technological advancements that have come with pitching. I mean, just what are your thoughts on that, and just do you expect to continue that year after last year?
Yeah, I think as baseball continues to evolve, we're going to continue to see technology be a part of it. Is it the driving force? No, it gives us information because at the end of the day, you need to be able to look in the eyes of that player and understand, can you send him back out for another inning? Is he suited to do the things that you need to ask? Because it's the guy in the uniform more than it is the information that's on the iPad screen or on the computer screen. So that gives us some guidance, much like my phone does when we're out recruiting and you're trying to find your way to the field. That helps you get there, but you're still the guy driving the car. And it's ultimately going to be the player that gets it done. And a lot of times, too, I think that the information can be misleading because once you get in the competition, it might say this guy struggles with a breaking ball or he struggles with the fastball or whatever, and then all of a sudden that hitter doesn't look to be struggling with that particular pitch. So you need to be able to adjust on the fly and have some understanding that just because that's what it says, we're not going to be so connected to that and so ingrained into that's the way it's going to be. But we will continue to utilize it because I do think it gives us some feedback to understand our guys making some growth and some strides in certain areas.
How excited are you with this freshman class, especially with a guy like Cam Johnson, who a lot of us here didn't really expect to come to LSU in the first place?
Extremely. When the first time I saw him walk in the office door, I thought maybe he was an upperclassman, and I had to do a double take because physically he looks like a Aroldis Chapman to me. I mean, he's a kid who's got background in strength conditioning with his father. He's put his time in, and he's put in the work. Talking to Brown and talking to Anderson and some of the other younger guys, it's exciting because for them it's new. It's something that for them LSU means the world, and they want to make sure that they maximize their time here. So my job is to match that excitement level with those guys and be able to really kind of pave a path for them based on, one, my experiences in this league, two, my experiences in the postseason, and then try to mesh those things together with the things that they do well, and then make sure that they're ready, because I think a lot of times we look at it as, okay, they're freshmen. Well, they've been playing travel ball and they've been playing at a high level for a long time. Freshmen in the sense of they don't know maybe what the conference play looks like. They don't know what those challenges are that come with traveling now and managing your time and your schedule. But beyond that, when you start looking at their pure talent and what they possess, it's certainly a good place to start.
Time for two more guys.
Yeah, Coach, you took the job a few days before the draft. Aside from Johnson, were there any pleasant surprises as you were watching the draft?
I think I've watched swings with Larson. I mean, there's some good swings in there that he possesses. Having Travinsky back, having Milazzo back, I mean, you're talking about a lot of experience behind the plate. Guys that know how to play in the postseason, guys that know how to help guys that are on the mound managing at bat or managing an inning, and that calming presence and that calming influence of guys who have played in the postseason, played for a national title, and even just gone through a Tuesday game where maybe you don't have your best stuff, and they're able to kind of, smooth out the wrinkles or calm the waters for those guys. So when I think of it, I look at it as the sum of the parts, not any one individual that's going to do it, because we're looking at a team sport. Yeah, the pitcher has to do his job, catcher has to do his job, shortstop, center fielder, and so forth. But at the end of the day, I mean, I think we made it through pretty good, and I'm as excited about the guys who are going to be able to play one more time here at Alex Box as much as I am for the guys who are going to go out there and play for the first time.
Leah Van, the Advocate. Jay was just saying that Jake Brown, you'll train as a two-way player. Obviously, there's also Gavin Guidry on the roster. What has been kind of your approach in training guys to be two-way players and kind of managing that at the collegiate level?
Yeah, going back to even my early days at UNLV, when I first started cutting my teeth as a coach, we had some there, had some at Oregon State, and then Jay and I had a couple together at Arizona. So you really try to look out for their arm first, because I think that the volume of the rotation with their throwing, with their swings, there's a lot of things that can be more from a fatigue standpoint, because most of these kids, people forget, they're usually playing football this time of year at high school. They're not doing baseball-heavy activities. Maybe they play basketball in between is kind of another adjustment, and then they work in the baseball season at that point. So between Coach McMillan, our strength and conditioning coach, Isaac Trujillo, our trainer, Jay, and myself, we all kind of put together the work, and then we get some feedback from the player as well. But we'll try to make sure that we handle their arm first, and then we'll handle their volume of their swings and their activity, whether they be ground balls, fly balls, things like that.
Thanks, Coach.
Thank you.
Thanks very much to Coach Yeskie. Familiar face returning to LSU this year after 15 years away from us is Coach Terry Rooney. Terry is the Director of Program Development and Recruiting. Will have a very big role in our recruiting process, as he did 15 years ago when he was the pitching coach and the recruiting coordinator for Coach Maneri in Coach Maneri's first 2 years. And Terry's first recruiting class back then was #1 in the nation and included names like Anthony Renato, Micah Gibbs, DJ LeMahieu, all guys who were some of the all-time greats at LSU, and of course were huge components in LSU's 2009 National Championship. So a great pleasure to welcome back to LSU Terry Rooney.
Thank you very much. It's great to be back. First of all, I want to say thank you so much for Coach Johnson to allow me the opportunity to be back in this role. It is something that Coach and I have talked to the last few years at different times about trying to find a scenario or different potential opportunities, and I can tell you I was all in, ready to go at any time, and for this to happen right now is extremely exciting. So honored to be back, and also the chance to work alongside this amazing coaching staff and support staff that we have. Certainly coming off a national championship, but I know that this is what LSU is about. It's about being the best, and this, even being here in the limited time that I have in the last few weeks, this staff that Coach Johnson has put together, coaches, support staff, everybody, is the best of the best. And you sit there as part of that staff, and it's kind of, I call it the sponge effect. Soak it in, and you're learning too, and let it out when you need to. And I'm trying to do as much of that as I can. So it's an honor to be around all of these guys and be back. I told several people, I says, it's amazing. Bill said 15 years. I can tell you this, it does not seem like it. And I tell people I was only here for 2 years, but honestly, it seems like I was here for 10 years in a very positive way. And the other day we were around Coach and several alums, and I was trying to get my arms wrapped around, why is that? After 2 years, truly, it seemed like I was here for 10. And it's very easy. It's about the people. It's absolutely about the people, not just the players in the program, the coaches, the administration, Baton Rouge, the community. And obviously, at that time, back then, it was a special turnaround, so to speak, in what we did in a relatively short amount of time. And I think those bonds and those relationships, as you hope as a coach, is something that'll be with you forever. Because as a coach, although I'm not in a coaching role right now, I think it's irrelevant no matter what role you're in collegiate athletics. You should be in coaching for one reason, and that's the impact of lives of young kids. and if when you're impacting their lives, there's so many different ways of doing it. And I feel like in those 2 years that I was here, hopefully we made an impact on them, but they certainly made it on me. So the opportunity to come back here and work alongside this coaching staff and for Coach Johnson is something that I can tell you what, I wake up every single morning absolutely excited and ready to go and help to continue to do what I can to recruit many of the best players in the entire country to come to LSU from that end. So very excited to be here. Glad to answer any questions.
Cokie Riley with the Advertiser. Coach, did you have any sort of conversations with Coach Maneri when it came to this position, and how did that sort of dynamic work out when it came to coming back?
Obviously, I did talk to Coach Maneri. I did not talk to him until after I accepted the position, to be honest with you. It took a little while, but I will tell you this. Coach Maneri, I can sit here and tell you, I'm proud to say, is my mentor. Without any question. I certainly would not be in the position I am right now, or the positions I've had the opportunity to be in over my career without his mentorship. There's no question. Certainly, as everybody knows, a great coach, a great person, and took me really, took me under his wing in many ways, and learned so much from him. Not just as a coach, how to run a program, how to run a coach, but how to treat people. And I can tell you, one of the things that you learn as you continue to move on, and I've seen it every single day, I think in my 3 to 4 weeks, of being here at LSU with Coach Johnson, and he and I had an opportunity to be in California together for really about a week and a half. We were out recruiting, and I was looking forward to that, to be honest with you. When I accepted the job here, and Coach Johnson told me about what our schedule was going to be, the chance to be with Jay for about 2 weeks out there and talk about players and get a feel of everything was fantastic. But my point being is this: the one thing that I've learned, I've always seen it from the outside of coaching and recruiting against Coach, but now that I'm here, and it's the same thing that I've heard from Coach Burtman, the same thing I experienced, for 5 years with Coach Maneri, and the same thing I've seen in the last month with Coach Johnson, is it's all about the players. It's all about the players. That every single decision I know that we will make as a staff collectively, coming from Coach Johnson, it's all about the players. Is what can we do to put them in the situation to be as successful as they can be, number one, and number two, allow them to have the best possible experience they can have at LSU, both on and off the field, right? So they can fulfill their two main goals baseball-wise is hopefully put ourselves in position, put them in position to win another national championship, number one, and number two, develop to be the best possible player they can be and hopefully reach the major league. So again, proud of my relationship with Coach Maneri, great friend, great person, great mentor, and again, to be a part of that tradition is an honor.
Leah Van, the Advocate. I was first wondering if you could elaborate maybe on your history with Coach Johnson, and then also what you like about being in this director of recruiting role. Yeah.
Our history goes, I was thinking about a while ago, Coach and I have, from a recruiting standpoint, just really throughout the years, we went against each other on a few occasions, but I think really from afar, and I don't want to speak for Coach, but certainly for myself, the level of respect is at the highest level. And when I tell you that I couldn't wait to work for him, he can probably tell you a few more of the stories in the text messages that I sent this guy. But I was adamant. I mean, honestly, the opportunity to work for Coach was like, I didn't treat it as recruiting, but I think he knew how sincere I was in helping him do what he can, to continue to build this program. And so point being is that we really started out on the recruiting standpoint from when he was at the University of San Diego and certainly did what he did there. I think at that time it was similar. He was at San Diego. I think then I was at Notre Dame and LSU, and we always kind of crossed paths. And I think it really probably took an even bigger turn when Coach was at the University of Arizona and I was at the University of Houston. We actually played 2 series against each other out there. And I think after that, maybe it was a little bit more of a heightened awareness, I think, of what each other did. And I think our relationship was really kind of built on there. But from afar, I can tell you certainly the level of respect that I had from a recruiting standpoint, from a program building standpoint, even when he was an assistant coach, was there. And I just knew, although we didn't know each other tremendously at that time, I just felt that there was something between us, a lot of similarities, in what we do. My wife actually says that too. She says, I've never seen you speak, I mean, as in the way, even before you hired me, as you do with Coach Johnson. I said, I just feel like there's so similarities, I think, in the way that we look to attack the day, so to speak. So from that end.
Hey, Coach, Jacques Doucet,
Hey,
WAPT, very, very cool to have you back.
Thank you.
When you were a coach here, your players in 07 and 08 described you as a relentless worker, recruiter, and kind of what you just alluded to. That is how people describe Jay. So do you feel this is a kind of a perfect working partnership?
I really do. I really do. I believe it. And although you said, and I appreciate you saying that, and I know it's somewhat cliche to say, but I really don't view it as work. I mean, really, it's like we all talk about, we're very fortunate to love what we do, and I do love it, I will say to get back to this level, which is the highest level of college baseball, the best program in college baseball, is something that I've been trying to do, but also something that I believe I was meant to do, to be quite honest. I know that recruiting has changed, so to speak, and then the dynamics of recruiting have changed. I mean, as much as within the last year or two. Thus, I think is one of the reasons that Jay's created this position with the NIL, the transfer portal, so many different variables going into it. From that end. But yes, I think that my experience, along with I think some of the personality traits per se that you might talk about, I think makes a great match, and hoping that will continue moving forward.
From in afar, before he took this position, what do you think made Jay such an effective recruiter?
Relentless, number one. Number one, I'll tell you this. It's two things. Certainly, and from afar of competing against him. And we did really, as recently as when I was at the University of Houston in Arizona and some junior college kids, certainly the relentlessness, the intensity. But it comes down to this, and Coach is the best at this. He's the best head coach in the country. He's the best recruiter in the country. And I sit here and I can tell you that without any hesitation on both fronts, that he's the best at both. And it's about relationships. And it's about the people. And having witnessed that firsthand now for the last 3 to 4 weeks, it's evident that it's about the people, it's about the kids, and it's about the relationships. And I think in recruiting, you look at it, recruiting, some people view it as selling. Selling. I don't think it's selling. I think you're trying to inform them, this is what we are, and let's hope it's a great fit. And when you're trying to inform people on LSU, the history speaks for itself, but it still comes down to relationships, simply because of the unbelievable history of this program, the greatest program in the history of college baseball, and what Coach Bertman built. Recruits aren't just going to show up here, just because of that. And I tell people all the time, they're not just going to show up here because of somebody's effervescent personality. It's not going to be that. There's more to it. There's a lot more that goes into that. So you have to have knowledge of what you're trying to recruit them to, which I feel like I have, not just from the past, but currently. And then you need to have that relationship for them to understand, can I achieve all my goals here of winning another national championship? 1, of 2, putting myself in position to be a great professional player, and then 3, it's about the people. And I know that's the number one thing that Coach talks about within our program, that it's always going to be about the players.
Hey, Terry, Glenn Wesco, 247. Can you just talk about what the recruiting duties look like in terms of divvying them up with Coach Jordan? I know that he's a big part of the recruiting process as well as Coach Johnson and everyone on staff. Just what does that look like for you in terms of developing with him?
No question. As I alluded to prior, the chance to certainly work with Coach Johnson and our staff, as I said, and Coach Jordan, I will tell you, the chance to work with him, and he and I will tell you, it's a nonstop, continuous text message, phone calls. I was going until about 12:30 last night, he and I going back and forth. He is so many of the qualities and attributes that I spoke about with Coach Johnson from a recruiting standpoint. Boy, Coach Jordan has every single one of them. And history shows that, you are who you are, and what he has done throughout his career, the best of the best, the best assistant coach recruiter in college baseball, what he has done, not just in his time here at LSU, but what he did at Duke, Appalachian State, and all of his stops. So, I think really my job is to assist wherever I can. In any dynamic that I can do. There's no job, so to speak, no task that I'm not willing to do. My job is to assist all of these guys in any area that I can, and that's really what we're doing with Coach Jordan. So I think it's to be a little bit of everything, right? It's evaluation. Number one, it's recruitment. It's all of those areas. So, and I think the positive is this, and I think Coach will talk about, could probably touch base a little bit more on it. The position, because it's new, Coach has created it, and we're just moving into it, it's somewhat fluid. I meaning that I think there's some different variables that can happen as we're trying to figure it out. As a matter of fact, we were talking about this morning, about 8 o'clock this morning, some of the things that we're trying to accomplish, number one, but how do we do that? So it's a little bit of a combination. But yes, to work with Coach Jordan and his recruiting prowess and what he's done, very honored to do it.
Hey, Terry. Matt Moscone, ESPN Baton Rouge. A little bit along what Glenn was saying, what were the conversations like with you and Jay about, because this is a new position that's been created, what did it look like? And also, this place physically wasn't here last time you were here. Thoughts on, the facilities?
The facilities are incredible. I saw Coach over there, Mr. Pontiff, and, not to go too far deep into it, but you're right. My last year here was the last game ever played, in the old Alex Box. Game 3 of the Super Regional, still probably the greatest experience I've ever had in collegiate athletics. I think about it all the time. I think, 3 back-to-back home runs in the bottom of the first, and I remember I just kept sitting there. I said, man, we just put up some zeros. Just put up some zeros. I remember in my mind doing that. But certainly that was an awesome opportunity. We actually came back here, ironically enough, the very next year when I left LSU to accept the head job at UCF. We came back here and played the very next year. And total just irony of the situation. Meaning, because scheduling is done in college baseball well in advance, kind of like probably football and basketball if it's that far out, but the weekend series are done 2 or 3 years in advance. And I remember Coach Maneri and I were saying, let's just cancel. We don't need to play. And, of course, I'm the young, let's go. Yeah, we're playing, And it was not good. It was not the advantage Tigers that weekend, I can tell you that. But I also remember, this is kind of a great story, Matt. I also remember at that time, and it shows you what LSU and how it's viewed even on the outside. I remember I told my athletic director who just hired me that year, I told him, I said, listen, I'm going to be the most least low-maintenance coach you'll ever have. So if I come to you and I ask you for something, it's going to be important. So I'll never be in your office. So I remember I walked in there right around Christmas. And I looked at him and I said, hey, I have my first request. And he said, all right, sit down. What's that? I hadn't asked him for anything. I said, I want you to come when we go to LSU. I said, I want you to come on the trip because I want you to see what it's about. I said, I want you to see what college baseball is about. I want you to see what the best of the best is. And he saw it that weekend, So I saw it firsthand from that end. But you're right, the facilities are it. Everything is here. As everybody knows, everything is here for our players and this team, as shown last year with what Coach Johnson did, not only for the program to be the best it can be, but for the players to be. And I know there's a difference, it goes together, but a team and a program. Every single year a team has the opportunity to be the best, and that's why this program is sustained, without any question.
Great. Thank you, Terry.
Great, thank you.
Appreciate it. All right, we'll go ahead and we'll bring Jay back up, and we'll have Jay answer your questions, and that will wrap it up for today. So, Jay.
Jay, you only lost one player to the MLB draft this year. What do you attribute that to? Is that just kind of luck or the shortened draft, or, if you could elaborate on that?
I think it's a few things. I think the contraction of the draft down to 20 rounds changes things a lot. And it changes things on both ends of the high school and the returning player element as well. I think had there been more than 20 rounds, you wouldn't see some of these returning players on there, which I think is great for college baseball, and I think it's great for the players because if you're going after the 20th round, you have a very small window to get to the big leagues. As far as the recruiting class, I usually spend December, trying to educate them and their families on what is the bar, for you in the draft, and at what point does it become not a question anymore that you're going to choose LSU for the initial stages of your development to be a pro baseball player. I think there's a misconception that it's college over pro baseball. It's not. It's what is your path to professional baseball, at least through here, because nobody's coming here that doesn't want to be a major league player. So I think maybe some education, maybe some luck involved in that as well, which, it's good to have that sometimes. And I think we just got a good group that values this experience. And if you turn on the TV, 10 days in Omaha, 8 games, the super regional deal here, that was impressive. Like when you say bye to that and you bypass that, that never comes around again. Never comes around again. But you can do all of that and not change anything relative to your pro experience. And I think as time is going along, more families are educated, understand the value of education, understand the value of this experience. So I think it was a little bit of all of that.
Yeah, Jay, right here. What was your, I guess, conversations with Hayden about him coming back? I mean, him trying to decide to come back or just bring him back, and the importance of having him back?
Yeah, it was important. I think I'm very big on trying to be very honest with players about what is best for them, and sometimes it's their time to go. I mean, obviously those guys at the very top of the draft, no question, it was their time to go. I would have loved to have had Grant Taylor come back, but if they're going to give him $1.7 million when he didn't even have to throw a pitch during the season last year, it's a pretty good deal for him. You know, you have to look at things for each player. With Hayden, it was like, look, you've played pretty well. I mean, you could make an argument that outside of Dylan, the end of the SEC schedule, the SEC tournament, the regional, the super regional, there was not a more valuable player on our team. And he's had some history with injury, which maybe made it a little bit of a checkered deal for teams. Like, what do we really have here? There's not many people that have the power that he has, or even the arm strength. You know, we saw it in Game 1 of the College World Series. So I worked hard on him. If you go early, meaning the top 5 rounds, you should go. And I believe that's what type of player that he was. If it gets past that, we need to talk about what this looks like. And he was great. And just as of a couple weeks ago, he sent me some video of him swinging the bat and said, I'm so fired up about how this turned out. And that's the way you want it. You know, you want him to be excited and look at this as an opportunity. So really wasn't hard. I think he feels like his best baseball at LSU is still in him. Like what we saw maybe over that 6-week period, I think he'd like to put together a full season like that because he hasn't really had the opportunity to do that.
Jay, I know you were talking about some of the guys that, you know, are here as like surprises, talking about the high school kids. Obviously where they got drafted was a huge part of that, but how many of those dudes were on the fence up until the national championship, and that national title was kind of that last nudge that got them here?
You know, the longer I do this, I think you can't undervalue the family's approach to how they value college and education. I was incredibly surprised, like I'll use Cameron Johnson as an example. I was incredibly surprised because of what I had seen relative to the talent. You go back last summer, whether it was Perfect Game National or the PDP or the All-American game or pitching for Team USA or what he was doing initially in the spring at IMG Academy. But the one thing I overlooked a little bit is, I mean, the multiple times that he and his family came down here, they really wanted him to go to college and they really wanted to come to LSU and play for us and believed that that was going to be important. And I was a little bit dismissive of it only because of how I viewed the talent. So I think that is something that I pay attention to going forward. And you know, a really unique story is while we were in the College World Series, some guys last year that signed pro contracts for like over $2 million, 2 of them texted me and said, I wish I would have come to college. So.
Coach, with Caleb Appleby, is there any sort of update on him? I know he missed all of last season.
Yeah, he looks healthy to throw. His body is in good shape. Coach Yeskie is going to start meeting with the pitchers today, and then we're going to start their throwing program. It's August 21st today. The first inter-squad game will be October 5th. So they have plenty of time to ramp up and get in shape, which we do that on purpose. I like doing the later fall because it gives the pitchers this time to get themselves ready, and then we get a more accurate representation of where they're at. And it'll be important for him, you know, to get on it, use this time well, and then be ready to go in the fall.
Jay, over here. With the addition of these 2 coaches, specifically your history with Nate and Terry's experience in the game and various stops, does it open up an opportunity for you to maybe do something else, do something less? Was that part of the thought process on getting these 2?
I don't know if do something less. I don't know if that's in the DNA, but the familiarity, big deal. You know, I mean, I'm really proud of our staffs that we've had here just in 2 years. I mean, you're talking about great coaches, you know, with great families that made great contributions to what we were doing. Like, I love those guys. I mean, they've become some of my best friends in the world, and it's great that they got to move ahead. And that's part of what we do here. However, this program being in a position for long-term success is the most important thing to me. And I think just a word or a thought that came to my head was stability, and maybe understanding what we could get out of both of their skill sets. I mean, I think they're two of the best pitching coaches in college baseball. You know, Coach Yeskie is going to be the pitching coach. I think understanding how the dynamic would work in the dugout, you know what I mean? Our communication, you know, together relative to when you're in those battles, evaluating this pitching staff as it was coming together, and maybe foreseeing some of the pieces that we may have by the time we got to the first day of school. I thought he was a great coach for this pitching staff also. And his skills and what I view him as the best at will match very well with them and put them in position for success. And then with Terry, I've literally tried to hire him for like 4 out of the last 5 years. And it was a really close decision. You know, when I brought Dan here initially, between Dan, Josh, and Terry, like, that was the pool. I mean, and then, you know, last year with Josh, and basically the only reason the decision was made was because they were on the position player side of the ball. And that first year I wanted to get off to a good start. And I knew Coach Fitzgerald's one of the best coaches in the country, in my opinion. And that's what we needed at that time for the program. And he deserves a lot of credit for some of the guys that we brought in that helped us just win that national championship. And then I liked where we were going with that, and it was literally the same thing with Josh. And on top of that, we needed to improve behind the plate, so we got a good catching coach, a guy that could coach third base and that could also recruit. But Terry, and those, you know, that interview process was so impressive to me. And as he mentioned too, we'd competed against each other, 4 players and on the field. It's like, okay, eventually getting this guy a part of what we're doing. And as the deal started to matriculate with Wes, and maybe shifting the vision and looking at, you know, other SEC programs had passed us up in terms of staffing. Like, we were behind, no question about that. And so presenting that, we were able to, you know, add the position, utilize a skill set, which I think he's as good as anybody in the country, and on the field. You know, one of my favorite parts of this so far is players are in the office and seeing him talk to them. Like, I mean, he's going to provide tremendous value. And what I've tried to do with all of these positions here is get somebody that they're overqualified for the position. And I know that sounds strange because it's LSU. I believe we have like 4 or 5 coaches in the building that could be head coaches at a Power 5 school right now. And I think both these guys fit into that category.
I know that Gavin Guidry played shortstop this summer. What are your thoughts on like how to approach him this coming season? Is he going to be a two-way player, or has that conversation been had?
Well, he did not play summer ball. He wasn't ready to do it physically after, you know, what he'd contributed, you know, on the mound. And basically to get that contribution on the mound for last year, and we really needed it with the injuries that we had. I mean, he had to shut down everything he was doing on a position player side. So there were no more ground balls. There was no more swinging the bat. We needed everything out of in the tank of that body. So the initial phase of it was to recover. Then it was to rebuild so he will be able to withstand the challenges or the grind, if you will, of being a two-way player. And then now it'll be a collaborative effort of putting that together. I do want to give him a chance to be an infielder. You know, that's what we recruited him with the design to do. And the opportunity last year wasn't quite there relative to his readiness and what we had with a few older players on the roster. But I saw some things in the fall that I liked, that he could make a positive contribution there. With that being said, this is one of the best relief pitchers in college baseball. And we're not moving off of that now at this point in time. So as Coach Yeskie spoke at, we're going to have a really good plan about how we manage all that. You won't see him probably throw competitively in the fall a ton because we feel like it's unnecessary. You will see him conditioning his body and his arm and those types of things as a pitcher.
Hey, Coach, right here. What does year 2 of development look like for Thatcher Hurd on the mound? Just what you expect could be a really big year for him next year.
Yeah. I think if you remove 2 outings last year and then you stack up his statistics, he was an All-American last year. I mean, if you look at it, I think 10 of the last 11 outings were, exactly what we needed out of him, including, winning the national championship game, getting the win in that 11-inning game against Wake Forest, throwing 3 shutout innings, threw 3 good innings in the game against Wake Forest that we lost, was spectacular against Oregon State in the regional. That's one of the best pitching performances I've ever seen in my entire life. SEC tournament, great outing against South Carolina, huge outing against Georgia. So I feel like it's more of a patterning of how we finished the season last year with him. I mean, the pitchability's there as a true out pitch, obviously. I think the strike zone pressure was phenomenal at those times. I think he made great strides, as a competitor. And what I mean by that is that's his best quality. But I think we had to work on, as I phrased it to him, take his best quality and always make it work for him as opposed to work against him. And I think he made great strides there. I think he is super motivated. He's put on about 10 or 12 pounds physically. He moved back here, quickly, only spent a couple weeks really in California, if maybe even 10 days, and got back here, got to work, and is on it in the way that he needs to be. So I think all he needs to be is himself. Don't go on stealing one of Coach's lines. All you can do is all you can do, and if you're at LSU, all you can do is enough. And that's certainly the case for Thatcher.
Hey, Coach, just want to ask you about 2 people that we saw a lot of maybe in fall ball last year, but maybe had to learn a little bit. Zeb Rudell and also Aiden Moffitt. Can you talk about their second year?
Yeah, I would love to. Both had very productive summers. With Zeb, he went to the Cal Ripken League, the Bethesda Big Train. They won the championship. They won the championship, and like 10 seconds later, his coach texted me, asked me if he could have Zeb back again. And what we did is, with the depth in the outfield last year, we had to make some decisions of, was this going to be worthwhile for him? So we decided to redshirt him from the outset. Got in the weight room, he added about 20 pounds, worked incredibly hard, and then went out and got his at-bats in the summertime. The talent is there, and this continually will come up throughout the fall. It's one thing to have talent. It's another thing to have usable skill to help LSU win today. So Zeb needs to close the gap on that. Now you have a worker, and you have an attitude that's willing to do those things. He's one of the players I'm very excited to see about maybe where we're at as we get into fall practice, and maybe somebody that people aren't thinking about or talking about that could make a big contribution. And that's what last year was designed to do, to put him in position to help him to do that as we move into this year. As far as Aiden, his team played all the way till last Wednesday. Like Ethan Fry, Mick Paul, and Aiden were playing in the Northwoods League semifinal game last Wednesday. And ESPN Plus, it was great. I flipped it on TV, and there they are. And got a chance to watch that, and had a really good summer. I mean, a really good summer. I think had a bunch of strikeouts. I think there's pieces of just getting game experience that if we can continue to get that here in the fall, leading into the season, get him touching the mound a lot. I mean, you're just talking about some uncoachable traits. I mean, the fastball can get up there. It was up to 99 last year in the fall. I think the strikes are much better. The quality of pitches, even on the misses, are much better. Makes it a lot more usable. And I think, I mentioned in hiring Coach Yeskie, Aiden was a guy I had in mind. Like, they click, you get to another level, and you have somebody that you go like, wait a minute, why weren't you using this guy in Omaha last year?
Coach, Stephen Milam, if I'm pronouncing
Milam
correctly, LSU has had pretty good track records with infielders from New Mexico. Is he a guy that's maybe not talked about amongst, the incoming class, but maybe is going to produce a little bit, or just how do you evaluate him coming in?
I evaluate him highly, and to be fair, I think, when I thought about the most important pieces of getting to school, I had 2 players in my mind. He was one of the 2 players that I really believed that we needed to show up here. He's a terrific hitter. He has a lot of strength and bat speed and power in a smaller frame. He has a competitive nature that if you're going to have any chance of making an immediate contribution, you have to have here. Has that. He can really defend. We'll give him opportunities at both shortstop and second base. I felt like he was going to be a super important player. I mentioned, those draft meetings in December. I flew out there to Las Cruces, New Mexico, and met with him and his family. And to their credit, they stuck to their guns. There's a scout I really respect, R.J. Harrison, Tampa Bay Rays, has done about everything for them, and they evaluate better than anybody. I mean, they took Trey and Garrett Edwards, so there you go, as an example of. And he's like, "Hey, man, we got the little man through the draft." Just saw him at the event with Terry. He's like, "You're going to be really happy about that." And then you mentioned, Mac Bingham as well. I walked over to Terry, and he's like, "Man, you're in a good mood all of a sudden." I was like, "Well, somebody I respect more than anybody else, in terms of evaluating players, said this guy's a guy." So I'm excited about that. Thank you.